Hello, my name is Kristen Bunn, and for my final project, I chose the topic of suicide in law enforcement. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem, also known as the forever decision. Statistics on suicides from police and correction officers and first responders. First responders, police, and firefighters are more likely to die by suicide than in the line of duty. Suicide by correction officers is at an all-time high in 2019, with 13 cases reported. In 2017, 3% of American adults reported suicidal thoughts, while retired correctional officers reported a rate of 31%, and current correctional officers reported a rate of 10%. Police officers are 3 times more likely to die by suicide than to be killed in the line of duty. Statistics on inmate suicides. Jail suicides increased from a rate of 29 per 100,000 inmates in 2008 to 50 per 100,000 inmates in 2014. Prison suicides rose from 15 per 100,000 prisoners in 2008 to 20 per 100,000 prisoners in 2014. Prevention of suicide among law enforcement. In the United States, they have a crisis text line, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, the Trevor Project, and the Code Green campaign. The Code Green campaign is a first responder-oriented mental health advocacy and education organization. It's also known as Code Green. We serve all types of first responders. That includes firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, dispatchers, police, corrections, air medical, and search and rescue. Their mission is to bring awareness to the high rates of mental health issues in first responders and reduce them, eliminate the stigma that prevents people from admitting these issues and asking for help. Also educate first responders on self-care and peer care, and advocate for systemic change in how mental health issues are addressed by first responder agencies. The goals of the Code Green campaign is to reduce the stigma around talking about mental health issues, provide education about the signs and symptoms of the mental health issues that first responders experience, increase access to culturally competent mental health resources, reduce financial barriers to care, reduce unnecessary organizational and operational stressors, and suicide prevention and postvention. Outside the United States, they have the International Association for Suicide Prevention. It lists a number of suicide hotlines by country. Prevention of suicide among law enforcement also offers mental health campaigns, which include making therapists available to officers. President Donald Trump has authorized up to $7.5 million in grant funding a year for police suicide and prevention, mental health screenings, and training as departments across the country work to curb the numbers. Prevention of suicide among inmates. Recognizing the warning signs. The most effective way to prevent suicides in correctional facilities involves the systematic efforts in recognizing the warning signs. Verbal warnings. Depression, psychosis, such as talking to oneself, claiming to hear voices, or suffering hallucinations, should be taken as a sign that a prisoner may be at risk. Reaction to incarceration. Many suicides in jails occur during the first 24 hours of detention. Many occur when an inmate is under the effect of alcohol or drugs. Young adults arrested for nonviolent offenses such as alcohol or drugs are often at elevated risk of suicide. They can be afraid of jail, embarrassed by their situation, and afraid of reaction of their family and friends to their arrest. One of the reasons that jails, especially small jails, have higher suicide rates than larger facilities is that they are the gateway into the justice system for most prisoners and the setting for their initial confrontation with their situation. Also, understaffed. Current precipitating events is also a warning sign, including like receiving bad news from home, conflict with other inmates, setbacks, withdrawal from drugs, or tension caused by court hearings or sentencing. Responding to the warning signs. Correctional personnel should not be afraid to ask an inmate if he or she has considered suicide or other self-destructive acts. Suicide prevention in correctional facilities. Assessing risk and imminent suicide risk. Effective communication about suicide risk. Knowledge about an inmate's risk status and history can be lost as he or she is transferred between units or facilities or shift change. Information that needs to follow the prisoner includes their suicide threats by the inmates, behaviors that indicate he or she may be depressed, a history of psychiatric care and medication, and whether the inmate is in protective custody. Use of isolation cells. The prisoners are to be placed in isolation cells. This placement can raise the risk of suicide. If an inmate thought to be at risk of suicide requires isolation, attention must be paid to appropriate observation of the inmate as well as ensuring that all isolation cells are suicide resistant. It minimizes the presence of items that can be used for self-harm, such as bed sheets and projections from walls or furniture that can be used as anchors for hanging. Training for staff. Appropriate training in first aid, including CPR, as well as the need to begin procedures such as CPR immediately. Also, the availability of appropriate first aid safety equipment, including latex gloves, resuscitation breathing masks, defibrillators, and tools of such for opening jam cell doors and cutting down a hanging inmate. Suicide, the growing epidemic. The code of silent stigma. Seeking help is not a sign of weakness, and only 5% of U.S. law enforcement agencies have suicide prevention programs. I'm going to tell you a little story about a deputy named Derek Fish from Richland County Sheriff's Department. He was just 28 years old and only been on the job 6 years when he committed suicide. According to reports, Fish was coming off a routine shift. He returned his cruiser to the lot at his station, and there, at the lot, he shot himself with his service revolver. He was, according to his colleagues, an outstanding officer who had recently been promoted. He was the third suicide in his department since 2001. Police suicide facts. On average, officers will witness 188 critical incidents during their careers. 17 in 100,000 police officers will commit suicide every year. Only 3 to 5% of U.S. law enforcement agencies have suicide prevention training programs. In conclusion, suicide in public safety is a growing problem in the United States, but not only is it a problem in the United States? But last year, France saw a 36% higher rate of suicide among police than the general population. And this year, 64 officers have already taken their own lives. For comparison, about 21 to 23 officers took their own lives in the UK between 2015 and 2017, according to the UK's Office for National Statistics. In this family, no one fights alone. Thank you.